All right, welcome to the Church Dropout podcast. My name is Alan, and I'm joined by
Lisa.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Church Dropout is a podcast. We talk about issues, topics, and teachings related to faith, life, and culture in ways that are sometimes funny, sometimes serious, but always insightful. If you have not already, please like, rate, and subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast app. Today is going to be a little bit more on the serious side. We're going to talk about something that we both have experience with, something that's hugely important. And when we talk about the American church or church in general, it seems to be a blind spot. It seems to be one of those areas that the church doesn't deal with very well.
Yeah.
Right? And I want to talk about that a little bit. And so we're going to talk about mental health. And I think this is an appropriate conversation based upon some recent events. If you guys have not heard, Mandisa, who is a gospel artist, was found deceased in her home. Now, to be clear, doesn't mean that they understand why or how she passed away.
Right.
They do suspect it's not foul play, but they still don't have a reason. So we're not putting anything on her. But knowing a little bit of her story, she spoke about, and I'm sure she would want others to take heed to, is her struggle with mental illness. But first, let me back up a little bit and just say prayers to the family, to those who loved her, those who are struggling right now. The Spirit of God be with you. We bear your burdens with you through prayer. We just think, man, just what a difficult time,
Right.
to get that type of news.
Right.
But yeah, I want to talk a little bit about this mental illness thing. And, it's not an exhaustive conversation, not a conversation that we can just have in one sitting or anything like that. But like I said, I think it's a conversation that needs to be had because I think the church really struggles when it comes to mental illness. Now, before we get into that, you and I have both had struggles or have struggles, present tense, with mental illness.
Yes.
Right. And not just from a situational perspective, but from clinical perspectives, right? So this is something that, that we deal with, right? That we are walking through, right? And I even believe personally that these were some things that were present before and I didn't know.
Right.
And this is why I say the church has issues, is because it was never even a thought from anybody around me in a church, in a solid community, that mental illness might be playing a part. And so I thought it would just be good, for us to have a conversation and maybe just dialogue a little bit, talk about, why the church doesn't talk about this. Why is it difficult for the church to talk about this? And just, share some thoughts on it, Yeah. So I'll start with you, what do you think? Why does the church struggle with this? Why do you think it's a difficult thing to address?
I would say,
or you can go any direction that you want to go. I was just throwing that out there.
Okay. I do think it's difficult to address just because it can be so deep as far as anxiety, depression, to schizophrenia, bipolar. So it's just, mental health as a whole is just a touchy subject. You know what I mean? And a lot of people don't even want to hear, especially in the Black community, don't even want to hear the word mental put in front of anything.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Because if you say mental, you're saying I'm crazy.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so I think that can be the big, or it's just a touchy subject. Like, I don't want to say, I don't want to say this person. I don't want them to think I'm saying they're crazy, but there could be, something that might need to be addressed. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
the stigma.
Yeah, there you go. Stigma. That's the word. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's huge. I think a large majority of the reason why it's not discussed in certain environments, especially when it comes to the church, is because of stigma. I think that's huge. I also think that to a large degree, kind of piggybacking on what you said, I think part of it is ignorance. I don't think the church is equipped or understands how to deal with mental illness, right? And in part, I think it's because some of it's theological, right? We don't know what category or where to put that in because of how we address the faith and healing and all of that type stuff. So it's not a category that most have built up to. We've just started to acknowledge it a bit more in recent history, you know, where it's become, this sounds sad, where it's become more legitimate mainstream wise, that there's more people that are struggling with this.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because we've had family members. I know I've had family members that you're aware of that we know without a doubt we're struggling with some mental illness, but it wasn't even a thought to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Partly because of stigma, but then also it's not even a thought to go there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, it's just not a part of the culture or categories that are there. And I think it's the same for the church. I think the church is largely, I don't think the church knows what to do with it.
Yeah.
And because the church doesn't know what to do with it, I think a lot of people struggle to find their way. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, a lot of people just, you know, don't know how to exist within a community. And the community doesn't know how to walk with people who are struggling with things, especially mental illness.
Yeah.
I would even just say sin in general, but that are struggling with things and still love them and walk with them when it appears that they're not being healed. You understand what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Because you know that takes work. That you know what I mean? And again, I think sometimes we're, you know, very front loaded on our theology, where it's like we focus a lot on salvation. We focus a lot on the good news in terms of what the good news does for us. But when that doesn't take root in people's life, or we feel like it's not taking root in people's life, and especially when it comes to stuff like this, I don't think we really know how to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think we know how to, you know, walk with people who have these types of issues.
Yeah.
Now, for me, you know, just my own experience, you know, I feel like there was, and I know this to be true, that a lot of the struggle that when you and I were going through a lot of issues in our marriage, particularly with my behavior, I know a lot of that was related to some mental struggles.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. Right.
Yeah.
And so for me, when I would get counseling or would, you know, go to the leadership for counseling and different things of that sort, because it wasn't a part of their particular worldview or understanding what that is, I was met with two things that actually worsened it, right? One, I was met with, you know, pray it away, right? You know, you need deliverance. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's something wrong. Maybe there's some type of hidden sin. There's something going on that's affecting you in this way. And then, but on the other side of that, I was, if it wasn't pray it away or anything like that, I was met with do more. Okay. So I was met with, you need to read more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How's your devotional life? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, you need to press into God. So my mental illness was really a lack of faith.
Yeah.
And a lack of trust. Right. And to be honest with you, for a long time, it really affected me because I thought there was something wrong with me.
Right.
Because I can't move past this.
Right.
I can't get over this thing. And so,
you were made to feel like it was your fault. It was something you can control.
Right. Exactly. And so in feeling that way, I began to question my own salvation, began to question God's love for me. Right. Now, let me say this. I'm not excusing the responsibility of pastors and leaders for what they've done. However, I will say they didn't know any better either. Right? They didn't know, right? Because, you kind of made mention of this off camera, but because a lot of pastors and leaders who do counseling in the church are not equipped really to deal with that, right? They're not clinicians.
Right.
They're not therapists by trade. They're not psychologists, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they're not equipped. They don't, they don't know. Yeah. So what they tend to do is do what they know to do.
Right.
Which is to, give people a remedy that's based in what's perceived to be a gospel treatment of an illness. Now, that is not to say that prayer isn't important or the time you spend with God. But to make people who have mental illnesses feel like there's something wrong with their spiritual life because this illness is not going away is problematic.
Right. Yep.
And hurtful.
Yeah.
And causes people to hide and actually pushes people away.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, I think the church it's been difficult. And I still think the church is in a place where it doesn't understand how to deal with mental illness and needs to become more educated.
Right.
Right. In this area.
Because I think there needs to be something as far as where they're educated to, okay, this right now, we're no longer equipped for this. Let's go another level, or
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Instead of trying to work it out. Okay, I'll see you next week. Let's continue. When you see a certain time is going by and there's no change.
Come on, Lisa.
Then it's time to move on to something else. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So,
I agree with that. And I've been in that position now, realizing it later in my ministry career, understanding like, wait a minute, there's other things that we need to deal with here, right? A person's inability to overcome that, whether it's by discipline or a person's inability to even hear those things. Like, it's because I'm gonna tell you, because for me, I was told I don't listen. And this goes back to even being a child, right? I don't listen. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, but to be honest, I was struggling and didn't know I was struggling. Right.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I think we do need within the church, one, to realize that it's a real issue and it affects discipleship.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that the word of God is void of power.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that the spirit of God is not indwelling and in working in people.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't mean that if a person is not delivered, right, immediately, that there is some hidden sin or something going on. Because we live in a world that is affected by sin.
Right.
People are affected, and some of those things aren't going to be moved past until Christ returns. Right. And again, just for those individuals who are struggling, who do have mental illness issues, or if you've never even thought about it, you know what I mean? Like, get some help.
Yeah.
And in the scripture, it talks about healing, right? But healing is doesn't just come by just this spiritual laying on the hands. God also blesses the means by which healing can come. Right.
Yeah.
Medicine, doctors are forms of healers, and God can use those things to bring deliverance.
Right.
And I could attest to you that he's used some of those things to bring deliverance for us. Now, truthfully, there's still struggles there.
Yeah.
Right. But the reality is that for me, I can tell you that it's just been helpful to now be able to understand why.
Yeah.
And put those dots together. But it's sad to say that I had to learn this 20 years later.
You could have missed a whole lot of stuff along the way.
A whole lot of stuff, right? If we would have had the presence of mind to understand that discipleship encompasses the whole person.
Yeah.
Mind, body, soul, the whole person. And that if sin affects the person, then there are deeper things as well that need to be rooted out.
Right.
That with prayer and with delighting in love and resting in the gospel and the good news for us, along with walking with others, a community of people that can help specifically walk you through those issues, I think is super key and super important. But the church has to make a change.
Yeah.
The church has to change.
And I think the church should allow people to be open about it.
Yeah.
Maybe even if, and I believe some churches do this, but have, some mental health groups or some, things that just where this is what you talk about.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because sometimes it is good, especially in my situation, to know that other people are dealing with this, and this is the road that they went to get their healing, or or this way, or you know what I mean, like or like, for instance, it could be family, it could be what is it called, generational, you know what I mean?
Yeah, actually,
and
absolutely.
So family history, that's what I mean. A family history where now you can talk about it with others, and talk through it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good, Lisa. I definitely would love to, honestly, do more work in this area, especially as it relates to how mental illness affects discipleship.
Yeah.
Some people just don't get it. People who struggle get it.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. It's not that you don't want to love God. It's not that you don't want to delight in God's goodness. It's not that you don't want to love others and love yourself.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's other things that are there.
Yes.
And that through prayer, through community, but also through the healing hands of others who are experienced in dealing with those things, can walk you through it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, again, we don't know what the cause is or what the cause was for her, but she was open enough to share with the world her struggle.
Yeah.
And so if you're struggling with mental illness, and you are a believer,
right?
Or anybody, but especially because we're talking to believers,
right?
You're not alone.
Right.
There are people who know and are feeling exactly what you're feeling and know what it feels like to feel alone and feel outcast. And
like you're the only one.
And so I would say, honestly, rest in the gospel. The answer is not to do more.
Yeah.
Seek help.
Yeah.
Professional help. Be open to allow God to heal and to use means to bring forth his healing for you.
Yeah.
Tell someone that can walk with you through that.
Don't be ashamed.
Don't be ashamed. It is
nothing to be ashamed of.
Come on now. It's nothing. There's nothing to be ashamed of. And if you really do a deep dive in scripture, you will see that there are so many examples of people who wrestled with mental illness, whether it was in bouts or what could be considered to be clinical in terms of they just were depressed. I mean, if you read the Psalms, you'll see there's people who are crying out continually, or people who are going through mental anguish, right? Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he was praying, he was in mental anguish, right? And I just think that we don't relate enough to understanding that our God speaks about those things, right? And that he cares for us. But again, not to just get back into the conversation. We just wanted to let you know that you're not alone. Yes. And, we're praying for you, praying with you. And again, take it seriously. Yes. We need to do better as the church. Yes. So this is not the last conversation we have, but we just wanted to at least say something, being that we experience it and we know some of you do too as well. So thank you so much for tuning into the Church Dropout podcast. Like, rate, and subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast at. And that's it. God bless you.
All right. Good night.